What's up, YouTube? So before we get started with this video, on First Take, they're going to be talking about who's going to be running the NFC next year. Is it going to be the LA Rams and Jared Goff or Drew Brees and New Orleans Saints? So let's see what they have to say about that.
The Saints are obviously a realistic contender, but there is some legitimate concern around Drew Brees, somewhat of a decline last season, but it's not just him. They lost Mark Ingram, and I know he's not the most exciting player on that team, but they lost him, and he was an important part that allowed Kamara to be as effective as he was. They could hand the ball to Ingram on occasion. So those things are changes, but there's a whole nother field out there. It's hard for me to get all on the Saints when you have teams like the Eagles. And when it comes down to it in the NFL, as much as we love the exterior players, which I'm an outside player, I love corners, I love receivers, I love running backs, I love safeties. We all know what really matters is how you play at the offensive and defensive line.
You're talking my language.
Yeah, I mean,
is there a pocket or not?
That's what matters. And it's not fun to talk about centers and guards and tackles or D tackles or D ends, but that's how the Eagles, when they won the Super Bowl, they won because their offensive line was the best in the league and their defensive line was the best in the league. And I think that with the return of a healthy Carson Wentz, MVP level quarterback, and the Eagles have the offensive and defensive lines playing like they have in the past, which I think they will. They still have Cox and Curry and Barnett. They still have a lot of good rushers on that side, and their offensive line is still one of the best in the league. It's hard for me to turn against a team like the Eagles. I'd pick them first, and I even would stay in that conference. And I know people don't love it, but I really like the Cowboys over the Saints. I think the Saints are great, and they were robbed last year and kind of robbed the year before that. They probably should have won Super Bowls in each of the last two seasons, but they're not my favorite team in the NFC coming into this season.
Well, Dom,
So I don't know if I would pick the Philadelphia Eagles over anybody else, but I would definitely look at the Dallas Cowboys this year. They are definitely a Super Bowl contending type team because they are stacked. If they could just manage to stay out of their own way, but not getting DUIs, not getting suspended, not beating up your girlfriend, not getting caught with dope in the car, not getting caught with guns in the car, not getting caught getting fights at bars or at clubs or wherever. If they can just manage to stay out of their own way, the Dallas Cowboys can be a Super Bowl contending team. I'm looking at what they did last year. So in the wild card, they beat the Seattle Seahawks and Russell Wilson, made it to the next round, and they lost to the LA Rams. And we already know what happened with the LA Rams. They went to the Super Bowl and lost to the New England Patriots. So the Cowboys are knocking on going to the Super Bowl if they can just stay out of their own way. Now, as far as the New Orleans Saints and the LA Rams, I probably have to go with Drew Brees because Drew Brees has more experience. He already has a Super Bowl ring, and he was knocking on going to the Super Bowl again last year, and everybody knows what happened with that bad call. And as far as Jared Goff, I think he needs a little bit more experience. Even though he went to the Super Bowl and lost, I think he still needs a little bit more experience. I'd probably bet my money on New Orleans Saints and Drew Brees. And as far as Drew Brees falling off last year, I'm not too worried about that. I'm not worried about that at all because we saw how deep he went in the playoffs, and it was a player or two away from going to the Super Bowl if the call would have gone his way. So I wouldn't be worried about Drew Brees and him falling off last year. But we'll talk about his stats and Jared Goff's stats a little bit later on in the video. So let's continue.
talk about pass rush. I mean, you gonna talk about pass rush? How do you not talk about Aaron Donald? I mean, guys, honestly,
he matters.
Look at the Rams. You have to pick the Rams coming out. And I understand the Saints were pass interference or not play away, but guess what? Players make plays in big moments.
Referees do too.
Apparently. Look at Jared Goff. I'm expecting Jared Goff to take one of those huge leaps. And we got to credit Sean McVay for feeding them baby food last season. What I mean, they lived off of Todd Gurley and the play-action pass. They absolutely lived off it. But the one thing Jared Goff he got is experience. He got to go pound for pound with Tom Brady. Yes, obviously they underachieved. There was a disappointment not winning the Super Bowl. But this Rams squad is still stacked. Todd Gurley's only 24 years old. So you got to expect this guy's going to come back as a monster. But ultimately, we all agree, if you can get after the quarterback, you can be successful.
And protect the quarterback, which you're right. The Rams can do both.
They're fine picks. I'm going with the Saints. And the reason I'm going with the Saints is I think there's a fatal flaw on both the teams you guys like. You like the Eagles, correct? Mm-hmm. I love the Eagles, except Carson Wentz has not been around the last two seasons when they've needed him most. He has not been on the field. He was the MVP of the league 2 years ago till he got hurt. Then Nick Foles led them to the Super Bowl. Last season, Wentz in the locker room, and Joe Santaloquito out of Philly had a very good article about this, took you inside the locker room. It's not that Wentz is a bad guy. His teammates like him and stuff, but he's a little bit, he hasn't really learned how to lead a locker room the way Foles knew how to. Let's put it that way. And then he wasn't available again. And what happened when Foles took over the team? He played them into and rallied them into the playoffs. Yep. And then they won a road game against the Bears. And then they almost beat the Saints at New Orleans. That was Foles. He's not there. Okay, so because of the dependability of the quarterback, the availability, I'm not taking the Eagles. Now let's get to the Rams. Boy, I loved Jared Goff last year. I thought this dude is elite. He has arm talent that's special in a system that's awesome with a great offense until you need him the most. Jared Goff chokes under pressure. I take no pleasure in saying that. I hope James Harden eventually turns that narrative around, as they say, right? I think Steph Curry has, for the most part. Jared Goff's going to have to do the same thing. He consistently performs worse when you need him the most. So who does that leave you with? Drew Brees, a Super Bowl winning quarterback, with Peyton, a Super Bowl coach, with a defense that's no joke, second against the run last year. They can play man in terms of coverage. They're not amazing, but they can play it. The offensive line, the Max Unger retirement hurts, but they replenished on the line. This is the team that has the best, most well-balanced stuff you need, plus a quarterback you can rely on.
Let me throw this out.
So I would definitely go with the New Orleans Saints and Drew Brees over Jared Goff, and not because Jared Goff chokes, which I don't know, he may have choked, but I think he's still kind of young, so I don't want to put him as a choker because he's still young. But as far as Drew Brees, he knows how to win. He's been to the big show. He's won a Super Bowl, and I would definitely want to go with Drew Brees and New Orleans Saints. So let's take a look at the stats between Drew Brees and Jared Goff. So passing touchdowns, they both tied for 6. They both had 32. Pass touchdowns. As far as QBR, Drew Brees' QBR is 115.7. Jared Goff is 101.1. Passing yards, Drew Brees threw for 3,992 yards, and Jared Goff threw for 4,688 yards, and Drew Brees threw 5 interceptions, and Jared Goff threw 12 interceptions. So to say that, Drew Brees has fallen off and he still can't do it or whatever you want to call it, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that at all. Because last year he went as far as pretty much you can go in the playoffs without getting to the Super Bowl. And I think he could do that again this year if, obviously they get lucky, don't have any injuries or anything like that. But I would probably bet on taking Drew Brees over Jared Goff. And if anything, I might look at taking the Dallas Cowboys over the LA Rams, but not beat the New Orleans Saints. I'm just telling you, the Cowboys are knocking on going to the Super Bowl. If they can just stay out of the way, Ezekiel Elliott is going to go crazy this year. If he doesn't get suspended for something, Dak Prescott is trying to sign a new contract. So all these guys are getting ready to get paid or just got paid. So they're going to be firing all cylinders. But at the end of the day, I'd have to go with Drew Brees for this video. But let's continue.
So they're losing Mark Ingram. He was the only player in the last 150 touches to average 5 or more yards per touch when he got it. They're taking that out of the offense. And let's go back to this Eagles conversation. So you try to blow by it, but you just now said to me that your question mark for the Eagles is that they're returning an MVP caliber quarterback. If that's the biggest question mark, give me those problems.
He's never played in the NFC.
Give me those problems.
Dominic, he hasn't played in a playoff game yet.
I'm telling you that the question marks on the Saints team are more concerning. Your biggest question mark is
oh
my gosh, they're going to have to. Can I finish? They're going to have to go back to an MVP caliber quarterback. Darn,
who has never been there in the playoffs.
Question marks on the Saints is obviously at the end of the season, Drew Brees' play declined. Yep. The question mark is also a big part of their offense, while not the flashiest part. Mark Ingram, you're taking him out.
How's their running game?
We talked about the
you
center.
You have Alvin Kamara.
I'm telling you, their running game was great because of both of them.
Down back.
How is it going to be this year?
Effective because of Mark Ingram. He's not an every down back.
Their running game's good.
Okay, so as far as this year, like I said, I would go with Drew Brees. His numbers declined a little bit last year, but that doesn't mean anything because when you get to the playoffs, he was balling out. Like I said, he was a player or two away from going to the Super Bowl. And he got beat by Jared Goff barely. So as far as that, I don't want to hear anything about Drew Brees' numbers falling off because he takes care of business when he gets to the playoffs. For anybody else, it could be a toss-up. If anything, I would talk about the Dallas Cowboys even more. Like I said, those boys are stacked and they're ready to get back to the Super Bowl. So let's continue.
To be worse. I think Kamara is capable.
Is it going to be good or bad?
Kamara is capable of being an every down back, but he's not as good without Kamara, and without Ingram. And I do think we just talked about the beginning of this. I was talking your language when I was talking about O-line and D-line play. You mentioned Unger's retirement like that. That matters. These are big question marks compared to the Eagles' question mark is, oh, dang, we got to go back to an MVP quarterback.
They are big question marks. Every team has question marks. I said both are fine picks, but ultimately when it comes down to it, it's not that we have to return an MVP caliber quarterback. He has not been there at the end of the last 2 seasons. He has played in 0 playoff games. He has played in 0 important late season games. He hasn't done it. Foles has been the guy. In fact, the team wasn't functioning as well with him last year as with Foles. So that's huge. If Wentz can stay on the field at the end of the year, we have this talk again, I'll say, okay, you know what, maybe I like the Eagles too, but he has not shown he can do that.
So I definitely have to agree with Max on that one. So he's missed 2 seasons where they got deep in the playoffs. One time they went to the Super Bowl and won it, and he wasn't their quarterback. Sure, he helped get them there, but he wasn't their quarterback. It was pretty much Foles. So that is kind of a question mark. Can he do it when it counts? He got them there, definitely. But to break it down, to get to the nitty-gritty, he wasn't the main quarterback that put in work. It was Foles. So I don't know. Let's continue.
Rams. Goff has underperformed. Brees got worse as time went on, I understand, but he's a veteran quarterback. We've seen veteran quarterbacks who've done it before do it again, even if they're not what they once were. Goff has never done it.
But the thing is, I agree with you with Goff. Last season, he took his lumps. This is a guy with the talent, like you talk about Wentz, who can make every throw in the book. Every throw. Tight windows, 40-yard, 20, dump-offs.
Yeah, so Wentz can make every throw, but he doesn't make every throw when it counts, like in the playoffs, like during the Super Bowl. So that's what Max is talking about, and that's what people are talking about. We don't necessarily know he can do it when it counts. Sure, he balls out during the regular season, but when it counted, he wasn't there. I know he was hurt, but we don't really know what he can do and whether or not he's going to choke. So let's continue.
Understands it, and we're talking about Wentz. He's Wentz with the experience. This guy balled last year. Not to mention he's probably got the best system in football, okay? Are we questioning Sean McVay? So from that standpoint, you give a little more responsibility to Jared